Hi everyone, my name is Sapna Sakya and I'm the Talent Development and Special Projects Manager here at CAAM. I'm so excited to be here with you today. You just watched a preview of a web series by director and producer PJ Raval and Cecilia Mejia entitled KAPWA. KAPWA means togetherness in the Filipino community, and the series takes an intimate look at Filipino families, with the first season focusing on the state of Texas. As you just watched in this preview, Lauren and her family, get to very delicate conversations on camera. And the goal of this series, KAPWA, is to have these different constructive conversations within the Filipino diaspora, coming together around the dinner table without leaning towards one side or another politically. So that we can begin to understand the varying viewpoints and work towards a more positive change within the fastest growing and yet oddly invisible community in the US. It's also Filipino Heritage or History Month. And today, CAAM is so proud to welcome to this conversation director and producer PJ Raval and Cecilia Mejia. Thank you so much for joining us today. Hi, PJ. Hi, Cecilia.
Hi.
I'd like to open this session by asking the two of you about how you came to collaborate on this particular web series, on this particular subject matter. So if you could talk about that a little bit and how you actually came to collaborate with one another as well. We can start with you, PJ.
Yeah, so, I made a previous documentary called Call Her Ganda, which Cecilia is also one of the impact producers on. And for those of you who are not familiar with it, it's about Jennifer Laude, who is a transgender woman in the Philippines, killed by a U.S. Marine. And it's a look at U.S. imperialism in the Philippines. And this is a film that has been on PBS. It's screened widely, and one of the things that we did very intentionally was screen it for a lot of Filipino American communities. And at these community screenings, we usually partnered with different organizations that were local or on the ground. Oftentimes, these younger Filipino American activists. Many of them very, very active in their communities, working on immigration rights or, women's rights, LGBT rights, you name it. A lot of them very progressive, a lot of them very active in their communities, some of them in college, all ages. And what was interesting, meeting a lot of these people, where a lot of them had family members with very different political points of view, very different points of view in general, yet they were family members. And I think this is, Cecilia and I started having conversations about this kind of, pattern that we were seeing as we were traveling around, the United States with this film. And thinking about it specifically at our moment right now, right, where, at least in my experience, it feels like the country is very divided in terms of politics, just in terms of points of view. And so I think Cecilia and I started recognizing, this is an interesting way for us to kind of explore the space, right, through Filipino Americans, and specifically that we are meeting these people who are not cutting ties with their family members. They're not, I'm not quite sure what those conversations are or were at the time, but the fact that, they were recognizing these differences already was kind of a huge interest to both of us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we had been talking about this for quite some time. I think it even started out a little bit to say that we never really see, when Asians are highlighted, it's like always a glimpse of what the Filipino American life is like. So when we started talking about it, it's like, what is the thing that seems almost I think across the board for most Filipinos, families the same. No matter how divided we are, we seem to come together anyway, for celebrations or for anything like that. And it's a common thing, no matter how different the opinions are. It seems to be like, especially for the younger generation, we kind of have to bite our tongue sometimes, or just be there with our auntie and an uncle who have varying opinions about different political views. But I feel like the last few months, it's been a little bit more. There's been a lot more tension, which has kind of made the series, or just even delving into it a little bit more. I don't want to say interesting, but yeah, interesting. So I think this is a different time, and to explore the community this way is really. I think it's going to be it's good for us too to see ourselves reflected that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have a lot of questions coming in, but yeah, I think people really respond to Lauren and her family in this episode in particular. And so there was a question about, how did you find Lauren? Because she's obviously very invested in telling her story and involving her family. Maybe you can talk about them a little bit.
Yeah, so I met Lauren because I know Lauren. Lauren, I'm based in Austin. I was teaching a music video class last semester that Lauren was in. And so I met her that way. And when we started coming up with the series, I just approached her and asked if she would be interested in, participating. And I should maybe take a little bit of a step back and say, well, when Cecilia and I first thought of this series, it was pre global pandemic, right? So originally we were thinking we were going to create a series that was going to be a little bit more observational. It would be centered around one interaction between two family members. And then when, the country kind of went down into lockdown, or the whole world for that matter, I think we kind of pivoted, but we also took a moment to really think about what this series could be. And I do feel that mostly Asian American communities and Filipino American communities specifically have not really been engaged that much in terms of thinking about politics and thinking about these kind of everyday issues. But basically what we saw happening, right, with COVID-19 is all of these issues came even more to the forefront, right? And when we think about it, there's a lot that Filipino American communities experience, just like every other communities, but specifically, thinking in areas of healthcare, education, even military. So I think we got even more interested in creating the series. But for me as a filmmaker, I thought, well, maybe this could also be a really great opportunity to kind of challenge the way that we're thinking about filmmaking and telling stories and the documentary form. And so kind of going back to your question, having met Lauren and seeing her already in terms of the way that she's kind of thinking and the kind of work that she's making, I thought she would be a really great person to reach out to see if she wanted to participate in this. Because the way that I'm approaching this is almost a little bit more collaborative, if you will. So a lot of our pre-production was just talking about these things, and then kind of giving her whatever she needed in order to start filming and recording, and then just checking in. So it kind of, in a lot of ways, was a really, for me as a filmmaker, really exciting process to try a new kind of style of storytelling. And so much of that storytelling relies upon kind of the honesty and talent is what I will say, and willingness to kind of enter these delicate situations. And so I had a lot of confidence that Lauren would be able to do that. And she seemed very, enthusiastic about doing it. So that's kind of how we met Lauren, and we're really, thankful that she was willing to be part of this.
Yeah. Cecilia, what about from your perspective? I'm sure, when lockdown or when the pandemic hit. It was right when you guys were planning to start production, right? So
Yeah, you're right. Like I think everything went to lockdown in March. We were actually aiming for end of March, April. And we had always sort of said we were going to start in Texas, so it worked out because PJ is there. And then most of the subjects that we had got initially are from Texas, so it works out. But for me, it was a little terrifying because you have to, you're not there, and I'm the type that likes to be in front of everybody or to just make sure that like things are going a certain way. And so we're just meeting people this way. Like I haven't met any of the subjects in person really. It's always been through Zoom, and then this is just how we're meeting everybody now. And then having to now put our faith in them to follow whatever direction we give them or PJ gives them as far as like even filming themselves is also a little bit, I'm thinking, what is it going to look like when it comes back to us? All these different things. But then it just was so interesting because they seem to be more open because there isn't really a camera that's following them. It just feels like they don't even know at the moment that there's a camera following them. And also like even watching them, I feel like it's almost therapeutic for them in this time. So I think this was as difficult and as interesting as it has been. I think it's also been just a great experience for us to watch it unfold this way, and for our subjects to be able to film themselves this way, because now they have an outlet. They have an outlet of what they're going through, and the world will be able to relate to them in many ways. Just because they're Filipino American doesn't mean that no one else can relate to them who isn't Filipino American. I think this has been a blessing in disguise. I think just the way that it's been set up, and I'm wondering how we're going to be able to do the next one this way, or do we have to go into lockdown in the middle of it? At least we know what we can do. That's also another thing. You're like, now we know what's possible when things happen. I think it's just, as PJ said, another way to do this, another way to be creative.
And I think just to, respond to what Cecilia said too, is as I agree with her, I think there's a level of intimacy in the footage and in the interactions that you see that I don't know if we would have been able to capture.
Mm-hmm.
I think the fact that Lauren is telling her own story and being the person who actually drives the narrative and what we see and what we hear is largely what allows that to happen. So I think that's also been really great to see happening with this series as we move forward with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I remember PJ, you had said when we were talking about this project earlier that Lauren really became a director as well as part of her own personal story, I guess. So what was it like working with Lauren? Did you I know you knew Lauren beforehand. Did you also meet her family and talk to them about the story? What was that like? Because
I did not. I mean, we had a phone. We spoke beforehand, and she told me about her family. I didn't meet them. It was all 100% through Lauren, and we had this conversation about what about doing this? What about doing this? I mean, it's almost like we gave an assignment, right? Like I created like a little sheet saying, okay, well, this is some of the stuff we would love for you to think about shooting. This is some of the stuff we would love for you to, think about, how to capture, even technical things like if you need a microphone, here's one, here's some settings you could use, things like that. And then really it was just kind of like go off and see what happens. And then, like the way a lot of people are communicating these days, we had a group text where we were just like, hey, what's going on? Tell us this, tell us that, okay. Oh yeah, this sounds great. And yeah, so it really was, it was a lot of just discussing with Lauren kind of like what are the issues that are on her mind, right? And what are some of the things that she's thinking about? And what are some of the things that she thinks her family's thinking about? And then, giving a wave then for this to kind of, some things to think about, right? While she's capturing her story. So,
Yeah.
so the short answer is no, I didn't meet the family, but I obviously met the family through watching the footage. Though what I will say is I don't think, you know, I mean, I do think that, you know, at least it wasn't a terrible experience for them, because Lauren has stopped by my house and given me some egg rolls and some snacks that her mom made, which is amazing, which has like given me life in the last like week or two.
I love all
so there was food involved.
So there was food involved. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you got to partake in the food. It was amazing. I wanted you to talk a little bit about the focus on Texas, maybe, because we know that, you know, Filipino Americans make up one of the largest Asian American communities, right? I think they're only second to Asian Indian and Chinese. And Texas is only second or third after California, with having the most number of Filipino Americans. What are the other stories in Texas? And was there a criteria for whom you might select, and did that change based on the pandemic? Either one of you can go.
Well, so I guess like logistically, it made the most sense to be in Texas. But if we're thinking about purpose, you know, you don't really think about, when you think about Asians, you don't think about Texas, and you don't really think about that way with Filipinos too. And Texas is also not to be political, but it's also a battleground state. So it seems like a lot of the issues would be there'd be varying sides. And then, you know, having talked to many Filipinos in Texas and Houston and other places, other cities in Texas, they were always saying, like, we always focus.
Oops. I think Cecilia might be frozen.
And so, did I cut out?
You froze for a second.
You froze for a second. Do you want to repeat that last little phrase?
So, you know, when I was talking to a few Filipino Americans in other cities in Texas, they were saying how there's always a focus on border cities, so like or like the coasts actually. So you hear a lot about the experiences of people in New York or in California, Filipinos, and the experience is very different in Texas. And so, you know, I think that was also an interest there. It just made the most sense, I think, to start off there and just to kind of branch out to other places. Yeah, I feel like, and you know, PJ's there.
Right.
Yeah.
And in a lot of ways, you know, we're thinking about how the Filipino community really does kind of, you know, live out all of these different issues that we're thinking about in our current day. And Texas in particular is kind of like a ground zero for almost every major issue we can think of, right? You know, to the point right now that even people are questioning if it's a red state anymore. Is it a purple state now? Who knows, right? There's been a large wave of immigration. There's, you know, there's a lot of policies and issues that are always being thought of in terms of Texas. So for those reasons too, I think we thought it would be a really interesting place. And kind of to echo what Cecilia is saying, to also expand viewers' minds of where, you know, Asian Americans and specifically Filipino Americans are living. You know, like we do know that there's a large population, you know, in Northern California, Southern California, East Coast, but no one's really thinking about Texas, for instance. You know, and right now, Asian Americans are the largest and fastest growing minority group in the state of Texas. So that is clearly something to really look at. And Filipino Americans, you know, hold a huge place in terms of the population of the United States. So for all of these reasons, we thought it would be interesting.
Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit about this is the first episode in the first season, of which there will be 3 episodes. And where are the other 2 episodes, and who are the characters we can look forward to?
Yeah, well, we're still editing these, hence the, you know, work in progress. But we, you know, I'm not going to say too much about it, but what I will say is thinking about what other things have happened, right, within the last, you know, couple months. You know, George Floyd was killed, Breonna Taylor was killed. There seems to be a real racial reckoning happening in the United States, and that's something that we're definitely delving into with the series. the idea of civic engagement, right? Also things that were happening where people were having to, be in quarantine and lockdown, yet at the same time that wanting to be out on the street and protesting if you feel like you want to make your voice heard that way. So we're looking at a lot of these things, and specifically through the stories of other young Texan women.
That's great. I know that you're also, both of you, involved in so many other things, and a lot of them might be related to, the fact that we have an election happening in a few weeks. I was wondering if you might want to talk about those things a little bit. Do you want to go first, PJ, and then?
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, it's, like right when we got on this call, we talked about it, like every minute counts right now. Like, there's so much happening. I mean, I think both, and, Cecilia, you can speak to it, but both of us have had a lot of conversations about what is our role right now, as filmmakers and as storytellers. And I think, for me, I'm seeing my role as someone who wants to use work and share it with people and start these conversations. So with that said, Cecilia and I are on fire. We have like lots of events and screenings going on. In fact, after this, we have a screening and a panel discussion of Call Her Ganda, which is the feature documentary. I was talking about on Wednesday, we have a project called Come and Take It, which screened at CAAMFest a year or two ago. That is screening for free on Wednesday about a young Chinese American woman in Austin who protests campus carry, right? Which is the law that allows guns to be carried on university campuses and college campuses. And so that's a project called Come and Take It. That's going to be on Wednesday. Cecilia has a feature right now that's in theaters, if you want to mention that.
I have a feature that was shot in Texas 2 years ago called Yellow Rose, and also debuted at CAAMFest last year. So that's out in theaters all over the country, and that centers around a Filipino-American, undocumented Filipino-American who loves country music. So very interesting, and a lot of what I've been enjoying actually is I don't want to say enjoying, but what I've found as a great talking point, because I'm we're very focused on social impact, is just seeing people's reactions to the film and just their commentary about it, and it's really like a great thing for me to see that, because now people are having more constructive conversations. And I think for me, not just as a filmmaker, but someone who thinks in the sense of social impact as well, and thinking about just also as an Asian American, just where we fit in this whole spec of being a model minority, and how we have to dispel that a little bit in order to move the conversation forward and to be to be productive with it. So I think just all these projects, all the things that are going on, not just between PJ and I, there's just so many things that are coming out from Filipino Americans lately that I think is sparking this conversation. I think people need to pay attention to.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Sorry, go ahead, PJ.
Oh, I was going to say I agree, and I think what Cecilia is saying about these conversations that for us, thinking about what can be inspired by watching something too, right, and seeing someone's experience, and I hope that's what people are getting by even watching this episode about Lauren. Like, Lauren was Lauren was secure enough. Let's say that, like, right? Lauren was secure enough with her family, trusting enough, right, of them to be open with them and to talk to them openly. And I think, if anything, I hope it inspires other people to do something similar, right? And maybe openly speak about certain things that, you wouldn't have otherwise. And it does remind me a little bit, but like last night, for instance, I attended a debate virtually, right, that were put on by Filipino Americans. Two people who were in support of Trump and Pence, and two people who were supporting Biden-Harris. And it was a very, as you can imagine, it was a fairly heated, conversation, or it was a very back and forth. But to be honest, and I'm not criticizing it in any way, I don't know how much listening was really going on. There's with a lot of these kind of formats, it tends to be a listing of policies, right? Or something that maybe even is a recycling of information that you heard on the news, or whatever information source you're using, right? So it almost felt at times like these were talking points. And in the process of that happening, it almost depersonalizes it, right? Like this becomes an ideological stance, not something that you live or something that's affecting you. And I think that's something that Cecilia and I are thinking a lot about right now, like looking at stories where you see how people are, like if we're wondering how people are affected by COVID, like let's look at some people who are affected by COVID, right? If we're thinking about people who are, who are undocumented dealing with that, like Cecilia is looking at that with Yellow Rose, right? Through a fictionalized story. And I think there is something about seeing the personal side of things, of how people are just living in this moment, that has potential to be even more impactful than turning on the news. Not to say don't turn on the news, because it's important to understand information and what's happening, but I think it's also important to understand how it's actually impacting people from their own perspective, right? And for me, that's always been something that's been powerful about filmmaking in general. Right?
Yeah,
You read a headline, but then to actually see a story or experience a story is even, more powerful than that. Sorry, go ahead.
No. Yeah, and I think, we were talking to Teresa Navarro, who I think is a CAM alum. She had mentioned something that I think sums up pretty much what we're trying to do, I think, is just everyone's listening to respond, but some of us are kind of taking a step back and listening to understand and to just respond in a way that we think is effective, which is to be personal and to really reflect, because I think most people are looking for things to happen instantly, for things to change instantly, but there's so much stuff getting thrown at us every single day. Like you can't even avoid the internet anymore, because that's the way that you communicate with people. It's just, you can't shut down anymore. Like you can't go home at the end of the day from work and turn off everything, because if you turn off everything, you're cutting yourself off from the world. So, and not that that's not okay, but now we got to start thinking about, instead of just reacting to react, or just reacting and then, realizing that there wasn't much movement when you reacted, you're just reacting, and then it doesn't do anything other than just cause more reactions instead of it's so I think, I didn't want to be in that panel that PJ was talking about, because I felt like that was how the conversation was going to go. So, and I often work with students, not just college students, but high school students. And my thing with them has always been, I think what is really, what I think we need to change is this idea of instant gratification. We can't expect things are going to change instantly, or be discouraged when they don't. We just have to keep going, and we have to keep understanding. And this whole, like, I hear the word amplify a lot. And I don't know why it's a trigger point for me, but I always feel like people are talking. It's just, we just have to listen. Just to really maybe we need to start listening.
Absolutely. Maybe we are coming, we're almost out of time, but I wanted to ask, maybe talk about this form that you've chosen, PJ, like the web series format, maybe, I don't know, but just from seeing Lauren's story, it is quite an intimate, right, perspective of a family and them sort of sitting down and having a conversation and really listening to one another. And, from all of the stuff that you're talking about, where people are just talking at each other and not necessarily listening or taking in what's being said and to really understand. I wanted to ask, why you chose the form of a web series, and you chose that from the beginning. It wasn't like a result of the pandemic or anything, although it seems like it's fitting, and there's so much that you can do with this form, perhaps, taking, and I think it's also a huge credit to the team, Cecilia and PJ, both of you, where you stepped up to this, I don't know what to call it, like a obstacle, this everyone was now not going to be able to travel anywhere. You couldn't actually go and meet your protagonists in person, but you took this opportunity to really think about, empowering your protagonists and helping them tell their stories, right? In potentially a more authentic way. So maybe you could talk about the form and why you chose it, and also because we're reaching the end of our conversation here, where people can check in on the series and what's next, so we don't miss the actual launch.
Sure. So I think a lot of it is just thinking about how we're interacting with, or, how we're approaching stories these days. Like me personally, I sometimes listen to a lot of podcasts, and I notice it's different when I'm listening to a podcast because I'm also kind of mobile. I also listen to them at different times. It's very different than going in front of my television and sitting down, right? Or I don't know, I just tend to access them in different ways. Or if someone shares something with me, so I think there's something there about thinking about the web and thinking about short format, that, in 20 minutes, you can really hear an amazing story. And if you're inclined then to share it with someone and have them watch it also, or be able to watch it with someone, and after 20 minutes, it gives you another 10 minutes to speak about it. I think there's something there about that short format, which allows for maybe more communication and kind of interaction with people in a way that maybe you wouldn't get if you're sending them like a 90-minute film, for instance. And in terms of the approach, it's been really great. And I see that there was a question asking if everyone's shooting their own story. Yes. Yeah, we're asking, we basically set out and ask every person who's participating in this to basically document their experience, right? So it's all told through their intuitive, camera work, which has been great. So all of them are slightly different in style, and that's something that we're embracing. So that's been really great. But yeah, Cecilia, if you have anything else to say about the web format.
Well, I also think it goes back to everybody's getting inundated with information, and I think this short format, especially when it's when topics are a little heavy, it's a lot easier to digest and break down rather than watching something that's full 90 minutes. Even talking from an educator perspective, it's a lot easier to teach something in short format, because then now you can they've gotten this piece of information probably all compact, and then you can break it down and have that time to break it down with them. So I think it makes the most sense to digest stuff that way. And someone told me before that young people tend to just sort of click on things. And while our generation, I guess, likes to search for things. So I think it's much easier for us to reach a younger generation when they can just click on something that's like a format like this. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking as somebody who has a 17-year-old
Yeah.
Totally. How can you get them to pay attention for a little longer than 3 minutes? That's always the question. Well, sadly, we're out of time, but thank you so much, PJ and Cecilia, for making time to be here with us on your very busy day. Happy Filipino History Month again. Congratulations to you both on so many amazing projects. Go see Yellow Rose in theaters right now. Check out Call Her Ganda and Come and Take It, which is also for free, right?
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here.
I also just want to say thanks so much to CAAM, because, for everyone out there, CAAM has been very supportive of all of our projects, and including this one. And so I hope everyone continues to support CAAM. And also a special thanks to Lauren and her family for letting us, for participating in this project and sharing their story with us.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear they're watching today. Hi, Lauren.
Yeah.
Yeah, Cecilia, go ahead.
Oh, we'll have going back to that. We'll have like a Facebook and any kind of social media stuff up soon as we're going, so people can keep up with us there and the website. We're slowly working on it.
Absolutely. And Cam will also, highlight
Mhm.
all of that work as well. So stay tuned. Thank you again. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.